Welcome back to Iowa in Focus. This week we're joined with Congressman Rod Blum on the campus of the University of Northern Iowa. So Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you as usual, and good to be back in Iowa.
Oh, thanks. First off, a few weeks ago, Congress passed a spending bill that extended the government, kept it from shutting down until December 11th at least. Back then you said that you voted against it because you said last-minute funding measures and one-time spending isn't the way to fund the government. Why was that the right way to go, knowing that if your no vote had been the majority, the government likely would have shut down at that point?
I think a yes vote just encourages more of the same. It's no way to run a large corporation. It's certainly no way to run a $4 trillion a year government. Everything seems to be last second. We are presented with a spending bill at the day before, the day of, and we have very little time, if any time, to review it. And it's more of a kick the can down the road mentality, management style, if you will, and that's one of the things we're trying to change, at least in the House. I think most Americans are upset with the way Washington, D.C. Works or doesn't work, if you will, and the polling proves that out. And this last second kick it down the road, like the highway funding bill is another example. Let's have long-term solutions, at least 3 to 5 years for a spending bill. Let's have a year spending bill. I'm on the budget committee, and we worked very hard for 3 to 4 months of this Congress working on a budget, and spent day and night there, and came up with, I think, a good budget that balances in less than 10 years. And 6 of our 12 appropriation bills, the House's bills, were passed and sent to the Senate, and none of them were taken up in the Senate. 0. Now, appropriations process, there's 12 spending bills, and they're supposed to be taken up on what's called regular order. They weren't taken up. This is one of the things that we'd like to change in the House. So let's go back to the way it worked for 235 years.
The short-term effect, though, would have likely been government shutdown. And people like Senator Grassley have come out and said that that's a disaster. That would be really bad for the Republican Party. It has been bad in the past. Why would that have been the right answer in this particular case? To shut the government down for a time and then reopen it once you got your house in order?
You just said it. We need to get our house in order, and we cannot continue operating this way. People sent us there to take a stand and to change the way Washington, D.C. operates, and to continue voting for these last-second bills is only going to encourage it. Nothing's going to change. So somewhere, someplace, we've got to charge that hill, plant the flag, and take a stand.
What's your answer, though, to the argument that the shock to the system would be too much to go through a government shutdown?
First of all, we shouldn't even use that nomenclature. It's not a shutdown. We had a government shutdown yesterday. Monday was a holiday. Okay. And federal government was not operating yesterday, and the sun came up today, didn't it? I mean, 80 to 85% of the government still is in operation. Social Security checks still go out. We still have our national defense. Things are still operating. So this whole idea that the government shuts down, we shouldn't even use that word. It is not a government shutdown. And only one person can shut the government down. That's the President of the United States. Because he would be the one that ends up vetoing a bill. So he's the one that would shut down the government, though it's not even a shutdown.
We're gearing up for this again, though, now on December 11th. That's when the government's funded through. Mm-hmm. What's the approach now? Is the approach the same, that that there needs to be a long-term funding bill, or it's not worth voting for?
We need to fund the government. We should have voted on we should have the budget we worked on, and that should have been voted on a while ago. But it'll probably be the day before, if I had to guess, on December 10th, and it'll be another crisis, and the media will love it. And we'll see what happens then. I have no idea. That's part of the problem. I'm sure right now in the smoke-filled back rooms, there's probably 5 people who are negotiating a deal of what we're going to do, and we'll get presented with that deal. And these omnibus bills are wrong. People are tired of it, and effectively doesn't let us to have a representative government. People in Eastern Iowa and myself, we're shut out of that deal. People and all of people in Iowa are shut out of the decision making on what our budget's going to be next year, because once again, 5 or 6 people are making that decision, and we're giving it the day before, and they're saying take it or leave it. That's not the way a government or a House or a Congress should run.
We've talked about this before, that in a district that is very Democratic, if not a majority Democratic, or at least mostly independent, in the 1st District in Iowa, is there an extra risk to a no vote and to a vote against some of these kind of bridge bills? Because you have a lot of it. It's not a very red district that you represent.
Yeah, as you probably have well ascertained, I'm a principled person, And political considerations never, and I emphasize never, enter into how I'm going to vote on a bill. I don't think this is going to be politically good, it's going to be politically bad. I vote the way I think the people in this district would want me to vote, and what I think is best for Iowa and what's best for the country, and that's how I vote.
News of the day today is that Planned Parenthood's announced that they're not going to take reimbursements and money for the fetal tissue donations that they do anymore. That was obviously the main sticking point of some of those undercover videos that came out. Does that change the narrative about Planned Parenthood and if they should get federal funding anymore?
Well, I think they receive over $500 million of federal funding for services that they provide. They make over 100, I think it's about $127 million a year in excess in profits. And I think the question still remains. I mean, they said they're going to stop doing it, so they admit they were doing it. I think most Iowans that I speak to, at least, feel that's abhorrent. That's absolutely repulsive to be profiting or selling body parts of unborn babies. So I still think there should be an investigation, and I believe that there will be a House committee formed to investigate if what they were doing and were they profiting on selling body parts, and what we're going to do in the future for funding for them. But I think we need to have the investigation first. And what I'm told and what I hear is that it'll probably last about a year.
One of the big things the House is dealing with right now is trying to find a new speaker. First, if we get back up to when Speaker Boehner announced that he was going to resign at the end of the month, what was your reaction then, since one of the first votes you took when you went to D.C. was to vote against him and try to vote him out of office?
Yeah, I felt, well, I think everyone was surprised. They were caught by surprise. But since I voted against him as my first vote, I guess I don't have a feeling one way or the other. Probably glad that it happened, because I believe we need to have new leadership in the House. I've often said if it was a business, I would quit it, because it is the worst run business I have ever seen in my entire life. It's totally top down. Everything comes from on high, and it should be bottom up. It should be the will of the body is the way a House should be run. And the rank and file House members have very, very little say on what bills come before Congress, what are in those bills, very little ability to offer amendments to the bills, and the rules change on every bill. That's not the way it's supposed to be run. And I think people are tired of that. They're tired of business as usual, and I'm one of the people that went to Washington to fight the establishment there, fight business as usual there, because people are tired of it.
The Freedom Caucus says that it's backing Daniel Webster. He was who you voted for the first time around. Are you behind Webster again this time now too?
So far?
Okay.
Yes. He was the Speaker of the House in the state of Florida. A recent conversation I had with Jeb Bush, he said other than his father and his brother, who were presidents, Daniel Webster is one of the people he respects most in politics. That's pretty high praise. And he knows how to run a House of Representatives, and he runs it from the bottom up. And it's not what he wants, it's what the body, the House wants. And so I voted for him the first time. House Freedom Caucus supports him now. But there's other people. There's going to be other people. Paul Ryan may get in the race. Jason Chaffetz is in the race, and then there may be others. What we want to do is, as a caucus, and there's other caucuses, lots of caucuses, which are small groups of Republicans that want to speak to these candidates and find out what their visions are, how they will change the way the House is run, the culture of punishment, will that be ended? Will they speak more to the American public on Sunday talk shows, for example? Will they go out and raise money? Just how they're going to do these things. Just like we would interview as a board of directors for a new president in a company. That's the way that this is. So all of our caucus groups will be interviewing all the potential candidates. And before we do, we're with Daniel Webster today, and we'll be with them until somebody comes along that we think maybe is stronger, or will change things, or change the vision more.
Do you think someone like Paul Ryan, if he does decide to jump in, would really be a game changer as much as people are saying that he is? I mean, it's a lot easier to talk about how influential he would be if he's not actually in the race for it. But do you think he would carry that much weight if he does jump in?
Well, I think Paul's very well respected in the House. I mean, he's a former vice presidential nominee, and he's from a neighboring state here in Wisconsin, so I've gotten to know Paul pretty well, and we're friends. And very well respected, highly intelligent, great work ethic, and he can sell our principles, I believe, to the American people. So I think he'd be a formidable candidate for House, but once again, he needs to come, in front of our group and other groups and talk to us about how he would change things. because, well, he hasn't thrown his hat in the ring yet. And I know he has a family and children at home, so it would be a heck of a sacrifice.
The president has said of John Boehner that they disagreed rather on almost everything, but that Boehner was someone who still wanted to get things done and knew how to get things done. Is there a danger of being overly polarized and going too far away from someone who's looking to pass bills and someone who maybe is, not to reuse your phrase, but overly principled to the point where they wouldn't be able to work with the other, work across the aisle?
Isn't that rich that the president's talking about being overly polarized? I've not seen a more partisan, a larger ideologue in the presidency than Barack Obama, so I find that rather ironic for him to be saying that. The House Freedom Caucus and these other caucuses, I don't think it's ever been about who's the most conservative. It's more about the way the House operates and giving us a voice. And once again, I go back to it's more about the will of the body. It's about ending the culture of punishment. It's about getting out more and speaking to the American public and being more of a voice on the Sunday talk shows, for example. So I think it's more about those things than you're not conservative enough or you're too liberal. I don't hear those conversations that often.
Sure.
But I do think I think the Republicans in the country at least want something that's willing to fight, something that's willing to charge the hill occasionally, plant the flag occasionally, and say, we're not budging, at least from a negotiating standpoint. Being in Congress is all about compromise, and it's all about, it's give and take. And I get that, we get that, but we've been, I think, horrible negotiators. And President Obama has been tough. And I think we need to get tough as well. And he'll say he's not backing down. We need to say we're not backing down. At the end of the day, then maybe we'll get a little bit of what we want or some of what we want. Today we're getting very little, next to nothing, because we give in before the fight has started.
Not to circle back, but to get back to what we're talking about with the government shutdown, isn't that a sign of overpolarization and not backing down and there not being any compromise on either side, where you end up shutting the government down instead of passing bills?
Yeah, the president has recently said that he is absolutely unwilling to negotiate on the budget or on the debt limit ceiling. He's unwilling to negotiate. That is very polarizing. That is, when you make a statement that you're unwilling to negotiate, what are we to do? What are we to do? And he's the one that has the ultimate say on the bill. If he vetoes it, the government shut down. So he's the one ultimately that ends up shutting down the government. So I don't think he's negotiating hard. We need to do the same thing. When the president said he's unwilling to negotiate, that seems to be fine to a lot of people. But if the House says, hey, we're going to shut the government down, we're unwilling to negotiate as well, that's somehow a bad thing. And I think I think he's negotiating tough. We need to negotiate tough. And at the end of the day, he's going to get some of what he wants. We're going to get some of what we want. That's a good thing. Today, it's his way or the highway, and we seem to capitulate too much to that.
Coming back to Iowa, Dubuque and Cedar Rapids actually have both seen an increased amount of violence this year. 5 homicides so far in Dubuque, a lot of shootings. One woman was beaten to death and left to die on the street. What can you do from your perch now, out of the private sector as a public official, to try to fight back against this? It's not all gun violence and things like that, but how do you fight back against this kind of, 5 homicides in a city like Dubuque just in a year?
Dubuquers are very, I can speak particularly on Dubuque, very concerned about the increase in violence in that city. I've ridden with the Dubuque Police Force on a Saturday night. I did a ride along with the Waterloo Police Force on a Saturday night, and I need to do it with Cedar Rapids Police Force because I wanted to see up front and personal, and they let me go right into the calls to see how they handled themselves, and I got to question the chiefs to find out if what kind of training, what kind of backgrounds are required of the people. When there's a use of force, what types of reports have to be filled out, and who sees those reports, what kind of overview is there whenever there's a use of force. I felt very good about what I heard in Dubuque, for example. If there's a use of force, which can be just handcuffing somebody, is the use of force. That has to be, a report has to be written up, and it has to go all through about 4 layers all the way up to the chief of police. And all these different layers review, was it a legitimate use of force? I mean, we should have 0 tolerance for police brutality. But I will say this, I think 99.9% of situations or incidents are handled pretty darn well by the police. And they have a tough job there. So in Cedar Rapids and Dubuque, I mean, it's more of a local issue and a state issue than it is a federal issue.
What is there to be done, though, from your seat in the House to try to work within the communities, though, to make sure that these instances of violence don't happen, and not so much between the community and the police department, but within the community themselves, that people don't end up being shot in the first place and don't end up pulling a gun on each other to start with.
Once again, I think it's a
role for you to
local
take?
issue,
Yeah.
and I know Dubuque has it's called the COPS program. I think it's community-oriented policing, where they actually have police on bicycles and on foot that are trying to be present and visible and in these areas of the city, and they map this out with GIS where most violent types of incidents occur. And it's particularly get to know the young people in those areas so they don't grow up with this mindset that the police are bad. So actually become part of the communities within a community, if you will. But that once again, that's local. Those are state issues, and federal government. The federal government has a bit of a role in the FBI. FBI provides a lot of training for local police departments and a lot of advice. So I always ask, are you taking part in that? Are you following that? And universally the answer is yes.
And last one for you here. We're on the University of Northern Iowa to talk about women in business. Coming from the private sector, how important is it to make sure that there are places for women to rise up? And glass ceiling is a cliche that's used a lot, but I think probably not without cause. What's the importance of an event like this one?
Oh, I'm excited about it, and I am in the business sector and have been my entire life, and most owners of businesses still today that I visit in Eastern Iowa are owned by men. And I personally would love to see more women own small businesses. It's where 2/3 of our jobs come from, are small businesses. The business sector, for the most part, it's not perfect, but for the most part, it's a meritocracy. So my message today is you all can go as high and as far as you want, depending on how hard you work and the risk you take and the amount of knowledge that you have of business. They can do it. There's nothing holding them back. And I just want to give them that message today. They just need to be interested in it and go for it. And we're there to support them. I think communities are there to support them. And we need more women owning businesses. Because it's, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's male dominated at this point. And I'd love to see that change. And I think they can do it easily. And they don't need any outside help. They're more than capable. They just have got to know they can do it, and it's there for the taking. And they need encouragement and support.
Are there tangible differences within the community or even within the business between a woman-owned business and a male-owned business?
I'm not sure about that.
No, okay.
I'm not sure about that.
Sure.
I just know that most of the businesses I visit are owned by males, and I'd love to see that change.
Sure. I appreciate it, Congressman. Thanks so much.
Good to see you.
again.
Yeah, good to see you.